Hey guys, and welcome back to my first gaming-specific video in quite some time. Before I get into my review of Persona 5, which I'll be reviewing today, I wanted to go over two quick things with you that sort of preface my review. The first is that going forward, doing these reviews again more regularly, whether it be gaming-related or movie and TV-related, I do want to kind of establish a structure and a bit more polish on the videos. This one's going to be very loose without inner titles and a bunch of inserts and graphics because I just want to get this review out of the way. I just finished playing the game recently and want to get this, my thoughts out quickly while it's still fresh in my head. But going forward in these reviews, I will kind of establish what you should expect to be sort of the system going forward, featuring a much more polished way of presenting these reviews to you. The second is it's important to note that in reviewing Persona 5, this is my actual first Persona game, so it's important to know that I'm coming at it from the perspective of someone who hasn't actually played any of the games in the series before. So I'm sure there'll be things I'll say that may or may not apply to someone who's very familiar with the Persona series. But just know that although I've played a bunch of JRPGs, I haven't actually played other games in the Persona series. So bearing all that in mind, I wanted to review Persona 5 today and say that, in short, I absolutely loved it. This is a very interesting game to take on playing because it's one of those series that I feel like people have recommended for quite some time, but based on the little I knew about it, I never really wanted to give them a try because all I really knew about them was a little bit that I saw through screenshots and things mentioned online, and that the game featured sort of a almost Pokemon-like gathering system of collecting monsters or demons or spirits, using them and combining them to form new ones, the whole process of collecting and really trying to capture all these. And on the surface, it just sounded like something I wouldn't really be into. The collection series and Pokemon-style games aren't something I'm really that into. I played the Pokemon games as a kid, and I actually played Alpha Sapphire a little while ago, and I enjoyed it, but by and large, it's not really my thing. So all I knew is it was a game with sort of anime-style graphics with sort of a collecting system like that, and just thought, this really isn't my cup of tea. But the reviews were so fantastic, and this game was on sale for $30 during Black Friday that I thought, what's the worst that can happen? Let me give it a try. It's getting these stellar reviews. It's fairly cheap. I'm looking for another good RPG to give a try to. So I bought it, recently finished it after I think about 84 hours on my playthrough and beating it, and absolutely loved it. I mean, came away really about as surprised and impressed with the game as I have been in quite some time. Expectations to my final review of the game was a huge disparity. I was expecting to kind of be thrown by it, but absolutely loved it. So the way I want to structure my reviews in this video and going forward is to kind of break down my thoughts on the game into 4 sections: the story and characters, the graphics, the sound and music, and the gameplay. So in order to do that, let me get first into the story and characters here. Now, for most of my reviews, and this one will be no exception, I don't think it's worth going through a long-winded breakdown of the story, because honestly, if you're watching this review, you've probably already played the game, or you don't want the majority of it spoiled if you're considering buying it. So the plot basically follows the protagonist, a male character who you name, who gets in trouble with the law and is sent to live with a guardian in a different city in Japan, where he has to live, attend school, and sort of rehabilitate himself in the eyes of the law and society. And while there, gets kind of pulled into this bizarre plot of entering what's called the metaverse in the games. And you sort of spend a portion of the game, as I imagine you do in all the Persona series, traversing this metaverse and traversing this sort of supernatural, psychological fantasy place, and then also playing out a good portion of the game in the real world too. Now the story here on the surface was another thing that sort of threw me when I first thought about the game, because I know it's set in the modern day, and a lot of my favorite JRPGs and games in general are either set in fictional settings or set in, way back in history. The modern day setting a lot of times isn't really something I'm that excited about, but it was executed fantastically here because the world felt so alive and so vivid and so fun, despite the fact that it was a somewhat realistic portrayal of a modern day Japan, at least in my understanding. I'm certainly no expert. But the amount of things you can do in the game, sorry for the interruption of the dog storming through the door, but I won't stop the review because of that. But yeah, I mean, the amount of things you can do, the characters themselves, let's talk about the characters. The characters here are just absolutely fantastic top to bottom. I was really worried that because this is sort of animated in an anime style and sort of has a lot of what you think of as typical Japanese conventions when it comes to storytelling, that the characters would be kind of ridiculous and too goofy to take seriously. And, you know, certainly there are ridiculous elements and kind of over-the-top sequences, but the characters top to bottom are so memorable, so absolutely fantastic. I can't actually think of a game that has a cast that I've played recently that is more enjoyable, more three-dimensional, just more, you know, better executed top to bottom than this cast. The voice acting top to bottom is great. Even the voice acting that's a bit more over the top, you can tell the voice actors really cared about their performances. They're really energetic, really enthusiastic. The dramatic moments of the game are dramatic. The funny moments are really funny. You know, this whole cast really just feels like fully realized high school age or slightly above high school age, you know, people. And that the game is much stronger for it. You really care about the characters. Even the character Morgana, who is this anthropomorphic cat who you learn more about over the course of the game. It's just really well done. I mean, by the end, you really want to spend more time with all these characters. The main character, even though he's sort of a product of the player, still comes across as having, you know, a really vivid personality. He's really interesting. The character Ryuji's hilarious. Each character feels very unique. Characters are just great. The story plays out in a really interesting way. It's the perfect combination of serious with good social commentary, funny, entertaining without being too hammy. I mean, you've got your sort of fan servicey elements that are neither here nor there for me. You've got your comedy. The story gets into a lot of dealing with exploring society's problems as a whole, and exploring the psychology of society and the masses. And in doing that, I think they do a really great job. The game's just a really good exploration of modern day society, the bonds between friends, you know, what makes relationships as meaningful as they can be. Story and characters are just great. They're fully realized, perfect combination of a bunch of elements, so great there. Graphics, you've kind of got three different graphical sections. You've got the graphics in the battles, the graphics in the overworld of the game, and the graphics in the cutscenes. The graphics in the battles I really liked a lot. Very colorful. Each character's animations look great. The animations are really detailed and fun. The enemies are varied. Enemy design's pretty interesting. There's a couple that are downright like lewd. I mean, there's an enemy that basically is just male genitalia, which is kind of strange. But by and large, I thought the battles look great. You know, the abilities look cool. The ability animations look cool. The different weapons and gear you can equip look cool. The battle, I mean, it's kind of par for the course for 3D graphics of that type. The overworld, a little less impressive. I mean, there was nothing really particularly noteworthy to me about the graphics of the main gameplay when you're traversing, you know, these dungeons in between battles and traversing the different portions of the city here. I mean, they're fine. They're fairly standard, you know, graphics, I think. There's not a whole lot to say. I didn't love them. I didn't hate them. They weren't a reason I would recommend the game, but they certainly didn't hold the game back. The cutscenes, which are in the anime style, are fine. You know, I don't watch a whole lot of anime. I do watch some, and I've seen some, and these aren't the most impressive I've seen, but they work just fine for the purposes of the game. There's not a whole lot of them. There's probably like, I don't know, a 5 to 10 minute clip every couple hours of the game, maybe even more sparse than that. Excuse me. So that doesn't play a huge role. So, I mean, on the whole, the graphics are fine. They aren't a reason I'd recommend this game, but they work. You know, the battles are flashy and well done. The overworld is fine, and the anime cutscenes are kind of far and few between, but they work for the purposes. The music and sound, fantastic. This soundtrack is absolutely great. this is probably another element of most Persona games that I'm just not aware of, but the soundtrack is a really interesting combination of like a jazzy rock poppy soundtrack set to this game that it wouldn't be the first thing that would come to mind when you thought of this game in terms of what you'd expect the music to be, but the music is just absolutely great. The main theme that I think is called not the main theme, but a main theme in the game, I think it's called Beneath the Mask, that plays when you're in LeBlanc, which is the coffee shop where the main character lives, is this really sort of slow, relaxing piano piece. It's just something I could listen to for hours, and it's something that plays quite a lot in the game, so I was glad to have that be so great. The battle themes are great. They're really upbeat, rockin'. A lot of the music in the game has vocals, and the vocals are great. The melodies are catchy. You know, for a game that I put 80 hours into, you want the music to be good because you're going to be hearing it a lot. And this game doesn't have a really diverse sound. This game doesn't have that many tracks, I should say. You know, it's not one of these games with like 70 tracks in it. You hear some of the same tracks a lot, but they're all great top to bottom in my opinion. The dungeons or palaces you go through each has its own unique theme, and they were all absolutely great. I mean, I've listened to them all outside of playing the game, so that's sort of a high recommendation. As I mentioned, the voice acting is great. The whole main cast is fantastic. A lot of the antagonists or side characters are very memorable, and their voices are good too. It just really seemed like a lot of passion went into the design of this game, both from the voice acting to the music. It really shows in the final product. And then finally, the gameplay. The gameplay is something that, like I said, coming into this game, I was sort of curious about, because the whole notion of dungeon crawling and collecting personas on the surface didn't really appeal to me. But I will say, in having played the game now and beaten it, just about every aspect of the gameplay I really, really enjoyed. The combat itself is fun and pretty balanced. I'm sure if you played Persona games, you kind of know how it works, but it's turn-based with a party of 4 characters. The different abilities each character gets, especially the main character who can wield different personas, is varied enough and has enough variety that you don't feel too limited by it. A lot of the strength of the game comes from finding abilities that exploit enemies' weaknesses, and there's a ton of elements and things like that you get to use. Combat looks pretty good. I mean, by and large, the battle system was nothing particularly revolutionary, but it was fun. I found the game challenging enough to be enjoyable, but not so hard it was frustrating or anything like that. The Persona aspect was nice. I mean, I liked trying to collect more. It was cool combining them to make new ones, and it was, always interesting to kind of see what you got. That, in and of itself, wasn't my favorite part of the game, but I thought it worked well, and it ties in really well to the plot of the game, so it worked just fine. I found myself really, really enjoying the portions of the game that take place in the real world, which is something I didn't think I would, because there's not many JRPGs that I've played that sort of have this backdrop of, one moment you're fighting monsters and the next you're sitting in class answering tests and, studying and reading books and stuff. Having not played a game like that was sort of something I was sort of curious about, but it's just done so well in this game. You really feel like you're presented so many options at all times, whether it be stuff you do in school, shopping outside of school, which confidants or other characters in the game you plan to spend time with, raising your social stats, which requires different things. For instance, you can read to increase, for instance, your knowledge or your charm. You can go to the gym and work out to increase your I can't even remember, I think your either guts or proficiency. You can increase one of your social stats through working out, but you can make tools to increase your proficiency. They give you a bunch of options for stuff you can do, which really makes you feel like you can kind of tailor the game the way you want it. And it really felt rewarding when you spend time with your confidants and other characters in the real world. The scenes you're granted as you kind of level those up really feel like they flow really well with between the characters as the relationships progress. The things you're able to do as your social stats increase. For instance, you're only able to talk to certain people once your charm has reached a certain level. Things like that really make it feel rewarding, and really give you good incentive for increasing some of those numbers. You know, there's so much to do. You can go on your computer and order stuff from the black market. You can visit a maid cafe. You can go to the batting cages. And all that seemed like it'd be sort of tedious and ridiculous when I started the game, but it was all honestly pretty fun. And by the end, I was kind of wishing I had more time to do it all. And that'll be my last comment on the gameplay, is the whole way that the game sort of progresses through the system of having limited amounts of time to do things. Now, it's a really interesting idea because it makes you think about how you want to spend your time. Each action you do in the game, for the most part, progresses a calendar forward, and you have to meet certain goals and hit certain deadlines, you know, by certain dates. So you can only do so much in that span of time before you pretty much have to progress the story. And on one hand, that was really cool because it makes you kind of prioritize how you spend your time. There's a strategic element to it, and it really makes you sort of make sure you're going about things in a way that's sort of practical. But at the same time, it kind of annoyed me because there was so much more I wanted to do at the end of the game that I didn't get a chance to. And reading about the game, I guess I found out that there's a lot that you can't actually do in full until a new playthrough, like a New Game Plus type thing. Which isn't enough to not recommend the game, but it would have been nice to have a bit more free time within the game to do some of those things, because I felt like I did miss out on a little bit. But by and large, overall, I think that's sort of it's a hit or miss system. It's cool and strategic and sort of a unique way of doing things, but also frustrating because I would have liked to have more time with the game. So if you can't already tell from my review, I absolutely loved this game. Giving it a score out of 10 using sort of a decimal system breakdown, I gave this game a 9.5 out of 10. And that's a very high recommendation, you know, and I don't take that lightly. I think this is really just a fantastic game. If you're like me and you don't think this is your cup of tea because it's too Japanese or too, you know, niche, however you want to pronounce it, too out there, I really encourage you to give it a chance because it's funny, it's the right amount of difficulty, the voice acting's fantastic, the music's fantastic, the game's really unique, you really connect with the characters, the story is very topical for today, and overall there's not a whole lot I can say bad about it. It's a game I'm so glad I played that I wasn't planning on at first, but I gave it a chance and ended up loving it. So Persona 5, two thumbs way up. You know, give it a chance, even if you're not into JRPGs. I think there's something here for people that, you know, might not normally lean towards this type of game. So hopefully this review was of any use to someone that either also played it and just wanted another opinion on it, or hasn't played it and was thinking about getting it. So going forward, I'm going to try to structure my reviews with a bit more polish when it comes to the way inner titles are laid out in reviews, and I just want to make the channel a bit more sleek looking moving forward. But I beat this game this past weekend. I wanted to record this video now while it was still fresh in mind, so I got this out before a bunch of those were ready, and I hope you bear with me while I bring the channel back up to speed. But thank you guys so much. It's going to be fun making these again. Persona 5, a 9.5 out of 10, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Take care.